Hello and welcome to this tutorial for Carveco Maker. My name is Leighton and in this video we're going to take a look at stacked text and how to do that in Carveco. So the type of thing that I want to do is like what's been discussed in this forum. So here you can see that this image has been machined down to a depth and it's giving the illusion that there is text over the top of other text. And this is just done by machining to certain depths. Okay, so if I come down maybe to a finished piece so you can see, let's say here, what's happening is it's machined down to this depth here, which is the large text at the back, and then it's machined down even further. And I'll explain how you can do this within the software. Now, I haven't prepared this or anything. I haven't got a clue what I'm going to produce. I'm just going to do this completely off the cuff. Hopefully, we'll have a few issues and I can show you how to fix those. Okay, so if we open up Carveco Maker, I'm going to select up here to create a new model. And I'm going to do this, let's say 12 inches wide, 6 inches high. The resolution, I'll just crank that right the way up to the top because it's not really important for this particular job. It's only really important for 3D work. And if I select any of the four corners wherever my origin or datum is set up on my CNC machine for when I come to machine it. I can also click the center if I wanted to. For this, I'll just leave it at the bottom left-hand corner. And obviously choose the units of measurements, either in metric or imperial. So I'll leave it as inches. Okay, so that starts up Carveco Maker and it presents me with a blank model within the 3D view. Now, this is entirely up to you if you want to do this in the 3D view, as you can see here, or if you want to do this in the 2D view. It doesn't really make any difference. The only reason that I do this personally in the 3D view is because when I want to simulate or preview the toolpaths, I can rotate it around and I can see them in the view. Okay, so that's the only real reason. Now, if you do happen to click on the middle mouse button and drag around, you can see that it rotates the 3D view. Now, don't be scared if you do this, it doesn't matter. All that you need to do is click on the view top over on the right hand side there, and it'll basically put you back into a 2D plan view. Okay, so don't worry if you do that. Okay, so let's start designing. So what I'm going to do is just do a basic plaque, and I'm more interested in the stacked text effect and how you can produce that. So to do it, let's create a rectangle, and I'm just going to draw anywhere on the screen. So left click, hold the mouse button down and drag out, and it will create a rectangle. And then what I can do is give it a size, let's say, I don't know, let's say 10 inches by 5 inches. And what I'm going to do is grab one of those corners and bring that in. You can see that it creates radiused corners. Okay, I'm not fussed about what size these are, just going to bring them in. And I'm going to invert them so it looks a bit more like a sine base. Okay, and then click create. And then I can cancel that. Now you can see that this isn't in the center of the model. So what I need to do is put this in the center. A real quick way of doing this is to press F9 on the keyboard and it will put that in the center. If you don't want to do that, you could just select the vector drop down and then align and then come down to center in model. Okay, you can see right next to there, shortcut is F9. Okay, so with that done, what I'm going to do is offset this. So offset vectors, and let's give it a distance, let's say 1/2 inch. And I'm going to go inwards. Select the vector and then select offset. Okay, so that's offset that by 1/2 inch. Okay, so what I can do now is start creating some text. So let me zoom in. And to create text, select the Create Vector Text tool. So click on there, and this will open up the text tool on the right-hand side. Now the font, as you can see here, it says brush. Now, if you want to install your own fonts, Carveco Maker will see them. All that you need to do is install them into the Windows folder. So just install the font like you normally would, and then they will be seen in this list here. So let's choose a font. Now, a little tip. If I click there and then click it again so it's still selected, I can then press the arrow keys to go through all of these fonts, and I can see what they are. Now, this is quite useful if you actually have the text selected, and it will update in real time so you can see how it looks. So for this, let's just try this sort of text, and then just click anywhere on the screen, and I'm just going to type in a name. So let's say their name is Williams. Now, I don't really like this font. Okay, so what I'm going to do is edit this. I'm going to change the font. As you can see, it's also too small. It's only 1/2 inch. Now, yours may be different to this. It basically uses the size that was last used in the program. Now, to edit this, what you need to do is hover over the end of the text. And you can see that if you hover over the text, you get this sort of eye cursor. So if you go to the end of the text, you can left click and then drag, and it will select the text. So make sure that you select all of the text. And then what we can do is do exactly the same thing. And you see how I opened it and then closed it? Now I can use the arrow keys. So you can see that I can basically just go through all of my fonts and see which one I like. I'm not really too fussed which one I use, really. Now, some of these fonts also may have problems. This is because they were created by graphic designers and they weren't using CAD programs. So what can sometimes happen is that you get vector loops or vector intersections. So if that happens, then you need to fix those in order to machine them. So let's say the size of this, let's say I want it to be 1 inch. Okay, and that looks okay. Let's press F9 whilst in this tool so we can put that in the center so I can see it. Let's maybe make it a little bit larger. Let's say 1¼ inch. That looks okay. So I'll select create. Now I want to add some text into the center of this. So overlapping onto the top of this. Okay, so let's create some more text. And this time I'm going to use sort of an italic sort of text. So let's take a look at what we've got here. So maybe this one. And then let's just click somewhere and then let's give them a name. Let's say John and Deb. Okay. And then select all of that. obviously we need to make this a bit smaller so it fits. So let's try 1/4 of an inch. Let's put that in the center, like so. And that looks quite good. Okay, so zooming out, what I'm going to do is sort out this overlap that I've got here. As you can see, the John is a little bit overlapped. Now, there are a couple of things that I can do with this. I could just select all of the text and then go to spacing and then just change this character spacing. So if I change that to say 10%, it changes the spacing in between there. Like so. Now, what it's done, it's moved it from the center. So just press F9 and you can see that it's put it back into the center. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that like so and then select create. Okay, so there you can see my John and Deb and then Williams at the back. Right, so what we need to do is sort this out for machining. Now, what we need to do is create some copies of these and we need to trim off certain areas. So what I'm going to do is utilize the vector layers. So basically vector layers allow you to place certain vectors on layers, but you can turn them on or off. So you can choose to see them or you can choose to turn them off. Now, this is useful for this because we're going to have copies over the top of each other. If you didn't have vector layers, it could become a little bit complicated. You'd have to make sure that you knew which vectors were lying over the top of each other. Okay, so just using the vector layers makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so what I'm going to do first of all is this Williams, select that, right click on it, and move vectors to new layer. Now, if I click this arrow here, you can see that I've got this vector layer 2. Now, what I can do with this is click on the light bulb and it turns it on or off. Okay, let's give it a name. So if I just click on that name, or I could right click on it, and I'm going to call this Williams text. Okay. And I could also click on that black circle and I could change the color of it if I wanted to. Okay, so select there, turns it on or off. Now, John and Deb, maybe let's move that to a new layer as well. Let's call this J and D text. Let's give that a different color. Let's say green. You can see that that's now green and I can turn that on or off. Okay, so what I need to do first of all is machine between there. Let me turn off the Williams layer. I need to machine between there and there. Machine this down to a specific depth. Then what I need to do is add the Williams and then join this all as one piece and then machine down to the finish depth. So to do that, what I'm going to do is select all of that text and I'm going to right click and I'm going to select to copy. Then I'm going to select to paste. Now, what this has done, it's pasted a copy of these over the top. So if I were to grab these and move them, you can see that I've got a copy over the top. So that's where you can get a little bit confused because you need copies of these over the top. So if I undo that and it's still selected, what I'm going to do is right click and move vectors to a new layer. And I'll call this, let's say, combined. Okay, and then let's give this another color. Let's say brown. Okay, so if I turn that combine one off, you can see that I've still got the original layers underneath. So what I'm going to do is turn off the original layers, just so I've got this. Now, what we're going to do is trim this off. So it basically keeps all of the outside of this. So to do that, what you would normally do is use the weld tool. So if I draw a box around this and go to vector and then go to merge and weld, I'll be completely honest, I'm not sure whether that has worked. So what I need to do is turn on the J and D text so I can see. Okay, so that looks as though it has actually worked. So it's going to machine all of the outside there. Okay, so that looks okay. Okay, so this Williams is what's going to be machined down to the depth. Now, what I need to do also is sort out this John and Deb. As you can see on the John, I've got this text that's overlapping, so that needs sorting out. Now, I won't be able to do this like I did the last time because this is all grouped together. So if I were to go to vector and merge, you can see that I haven't got weld. That's because it's all grouped together. It's one entity. So what I need to do is right click and then not ungroup vectors. If I were to ungroup vectors, what would happen is every letter would have its own group of vectors. So here you can see on the O that just clicking on the inside will give me a group of vectors. So if I were to do this now and select to merge, and then let's turn off. Now what's happened here is that what I've done, I've merged these, but I've got this combined vector layer selected and it's moved it onto this combined vector layer, which is what I don't want. So let's undo that. Now, how this undo will work is that it will undo me turning on and off the vector layers. So I have to keep on undoing until I get right the way back. So if I undo again, so there you can see I've got my John and Deb back. So if I turn off the combined layer, what I need to make sure that I do is go back to the J and D text, and then it becomes highlighted. Okay, so let me try that again. So I go to vector, merge, and weld. Now you can see the problem that I've got is that it's removed the inside islands of the text. Now that's because I only ungrouped. When you're doing text and you want to use this tool, you normally need to ungroup all. So every section is its own vector. So let's undo that again. Select the text, right click, and then ungroup all. Now what this does is if I click on the same O, you can see that that is a separate entity now. Okay. So what I need to do is select all of the John and Deb, or I can see that the Deb isn't even overlapping or the and, so I could just select John. And let's deselect the inside islands, because if I don't do that, it will delete them. That was the problem that I was getting before. And I can just deselect that one as well. So it's only really these three that are overlapping. Now I could just trim this off, but it's a lot easier just doing the weld, to be completely honest with you. So if I go to vector, merge, and then weld, you can see that it all becomes one entity. Now, if I want to put this back to being a group, so here you can see it's all separate entities, just draw a box around it or select it, however is the easiest for you. And then if you go over to here, you've got group. So Control G, and then it will group it all together. So I can select it again. Okay, so let's go back to combined, make sure that that looks okay. Got the J&D text, we've got the Williams text. Okay, so that's all set up for machining. So this is basically the hardest bit, is working out which parts need to be machined. Now, I did do this wrong here, so you can see that I've lost the inside portion of that. So if I go there, you can see that I've lost all these inside islands. So what I needed to do was to do the weld exactly how I'd done it just. Okay, so that's what happens if you don't. So that's not a problem. I'll show you how you can get around that. So let's turn that off, and I'm going to ungroup all of these again. And then I'm going to select these islands. And that one, like so. And then right click. And again, I'm going to copy. And again, I'm going to paste. And then what I'm going to do whilst it's selected is move it to the combined layer. Okay, so if I turn off the J&D text, you can see that it's just got John and Deb. If I turn on combined, you can see that it's also got these little islands in here, which it was missing before. So that's because I welded it and it was all grouped together. Okay, so this is the hardest bit of doing this. So you need to make sure that you've got this text all basically grouped together or merged together. So you need something that looks like this. So this is going to be the overall machine to depth vectors. And then you also need, little tip, if you right click on a light bulb, it will turn the others off and turn on the one that you're clicking on. And you also need this John and Deb text. So this is basically going to go down to a certain depth, and then you're going to machine the outside so it gives the effect that this is standing proud. Okay, so let's turn on that layer, and I'm going to turn on the default layer. Okay, so we can start machining this now. So to machine this, what we're going to do is go to toolpaths, and we're going to use the area clearance toolpath. Now, if I were to do this like as it is now, this wouldn't really work. What I need to do is do this down to a depth on the John and Deb text. So the part that's standing at the very front, that's what I need to machine first of all. So let's turn off the combine and let's turn that on. So let's select there and select there. Finish depth, let's do this, I don't know, let's say 45. Okay, and let's add a tool to this, or let's add a few tools to this. Let's go to my inch tools. Let's use the largest tool that I have just to blast this away first of all. And then let's add further tools to it. So let's add, let's say a 1/4 inch. And then maybe let's add a 1/16 of an inch tool just to get into the corners here, just so it can pick it all out. Okay, so if I were to calculate this now, let's set up the material first of all. So let's say that this is, let's say 3/4 of an inch. Don't worry about this model positioning material. That's basically where a 3D object would be in the material. Because we're not using 3D, don't worry about it. The material Z0, this is quite important. This is if you set up your Z origin on your CNC to be at the machine bed or on top of the material. Okay, so whichever one you choose, you need to set this up here. So select OK, and then let's calculate this. Okay, so what's happened here is it's going across and then in X and then stepping over in Y and so on. Now, if I just open up these toolpaths and then I'll just turn off these light bulbs. Okay. Now, what this is showing me is how it's going to actually machine. So this here, these larger width red lines are the larger tool. So they're the 1/2 inch tool. So if I right click on that, you can see that's where the 1/2 inch tool is getting in. If I right click on the 1/4 inch, that's where the 1/4 inch is going. So it's doing what we call rest machining. So it's basically going where the 1/2 inch tool can't get in. Okay, so it's not going over the whole thing again. It's just going over the areas where that larger tool can't get. And the same with the 1/16 of an inch. Okay, and it's getting right into those areas. So if I turn all of those back on, and what I'm going to do is change the method that this is working for, maybe for the smaller tools, because if you take a look at it, see how it's coming back and forth, and it's going to take a little bit longer to actually machine this, and I don't really want it to machine like this. So what I'm going to do is change this to be offset. I'm also going to change the 1/4 of an inch to be offset. What this will do, it will offset the vectors and then follow the offset as it goes round. So if I calculate that, you can see that it's going round, okay, rather than stepping over. So there will be less air moves and less jumping around on the machine. Okay, so let's turn off all of those light bulbs. Okay, so that looks a lot better. Okay, so if I close that, what I need to do is remember these tools that I've used. Okay, because if I don't go down on the next part with the 1/16 of an inch end mill, what I will have is a mismatch when it comes to doing the next part. So I need to make sure that I use the same tools on the next section. Okay, so if I close that, I also need to make sure that I remember what the finished depth is. Okay, because I don't need to machine all of that again. Okay, so close that, and what I'm going to do is rotate this around. So this is what I like to do so I can see exactly where the tool paths are going. So if I right click here and then simulate toolpath, this will give me a simulation of what's going to be cut. Okay, so I can see that it says John and Deb. So that's the John and Deb part. This is the bit that's going to be standing proud. Now what I need to do is create that Williams in the background. We're going to create that by using the combined vector layer. So if I delete the simulation, and when you do this and you delete the simulation, you'll be greeted with this blank model. What's happened here is that it's turned off all of the vectors. So to see them again, what you need to do is select toggle vector visibility, and they'll come back on. Okay, you haven't deleted the vectors or anything. It's just that they've been hidden. Okay, Okay, so what we need to do is turn off this John and Deb vector layer, and we'll turn on the combined vector layer. Okay, so what we're going to do now, let's take a plan view again, is select that and then press Shift, and I'm going to draw a box around this. Okay, so this is everything that's going to be machined now. Let's rename the area cleared just so I don't get confused. I'll just call this J&D, I don't know, standing proud, just so I know what it actually is. Let's go to toolpaths. Again, exactly the same thing, do an area clearance. Now, this time, I don't need to machine what's already been machined on there. So what I can do is set the start depth to be 40 thou. Okay, so it's automatically going to start 40 thou deep because it's already been machined out. The finish depth, let's say that this is going to be 1/2 inch. Okay, so this is coming right the way down to the depth. Tools list, let's just use the same tools. Add a tool, add the 1/4 inch, and then finally add the 1/16 of an inch. Okay, the 1/16 of an inch and the 1/4, I'll do those as offsets, and then calculate. Okay, so if I open up that area clear there, and I'll just call this Williams depth, just so I know what this is. And I'm going to turn that off. And you can see that it's machining all inside there, doing some rest machining. Okay, so let's simulate this. This is the only way that we're going to get a good picture of what's actually going on. So if I right click on J&D standing proud, let's simulate that toolpath. So there you can see John and Deb. Let's right click on Williams depth, simulate that. And you can see what's happening if I zoom in is that this John and Deb is standing proud. It's 40 thou higher than the Williams. Okay, and that's basically how you would do stacked text. Okay, so what we need to do is just cut the part out. So to do that, let's delete the simulation, and then let's turn my vectors back on. Just select the outside. Let's do a profile. Finish depth, it automatically assumes that you're cutting the part out. Okay, make sure that you got your profile set to outside. Profiling tool, let's just use our large one, 1/2 inch. And select calculate. Now, if I rotate this around, this is the reason that I like to use the 3D view. You can see the depth of cuts. So you see this red here. This is telling me that this is machining in 2 cuts. Now, let's say, for instance, I wanted to do this in 3 different passes. Let's say 1/4 inch passes. So what I could do here is change the profiling tool, click on the drop down. You can see the step down is 1/2 inch. So it's basically splitting up this 3/4 inch into 2 passes. So if I were to change that to 1/4 inch and calculate, it would change it to 3 passes. Now this grey pass at the top here, that's just a 2D preview. So what I've been doing is turning that off because I don't need to see it. So you can see that it's changed that into 3 passes. So if I close that, and then let's simulate the whole lot as one go. So right click toolpaths and then simulate all toolpaths. And you can see that it's cut our part out. So if we go to simulation, and then let's delete the waste material because it looks a bit weird. And I'm going to keep pick material and just click on that. Okay, so there you can see I finished stacked text. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just show you how to export this to the CNC quickly. So if I go to Toolpaths and then go to Save Toolpaths, which is here, and you can see that I've got all these different tools. Now, if you've got a tool changer, what you would need to do is just make sure that you've got the tool number set up correctly, and you can just output this, send it to the machine. If you haven't got a tool changer, you can do one of two things. You could move all of these to this side and just save each one individually. But what you can also do is save toolpaths to separate files down here. So it creates a different toolpath for each of these files, and you just send it to the CNC in turn. If I also append toolpath details to file names, this will also add all of this information onto the file name, so I know what this is. Okay, so let's browse for a location to save this. So if I go to my desktop, let's call this new folder. Let's say I'll call this stacked text. Select open, and I'll just call this stacked. Select open. So you can see that it's saving into there. Okay, and the file name is stacked. Now, depending on how you connect to the CNC, I have also seen people where they just browse straight into the CNC through the network and just save it straight onto the CNC. It's entirely up to you. Right, machine file format. This is the most important part of this bit. So if you click on there, you can see that we've got lots and lots of what we call post processors. Okay, these just convert the information from Carveco into a format that your CNC will understand. Now, all of these post processors are included within the basic version of Carveco Maker, all the way up to Carveco. So if I were to select a post processor, let's say a generic G code, and then select save, what this does, it saves it into that location. So now if I find that folder, which is here, you can see that I've got all of these toolpaths or these tab files, which are ready to send to the CNC machine. Now, if you open these in WordPad or any sort of word processing document viewer, you can see what they actually are. Okay, so it's just G code, basically giving your CNC commands on what to do. And it's also got coordinates in there showing it where to move to.